Okay, welcome everyone, as we welcome in A.B. Spry and Ben Zion Konitz, Fuchs, Baruch Ian, Irving Fishbaum, Stephen Holtzman, Aaron Swade, Eddie Chazan, Marshall Castle, Menachem Umansky, Shalom Fogel, Berish Gesseman, Shelley Zeitlin, Ruven Pollack, Yeshua Shmuel Eisenberg, Yitzi Muller, Shimon. We have here in the shul, we have Saba, and we have Blumenfeld, Gedalia Engel, and Rich Leonard, Ruvain Shannet, David Helfgott now joining us, and Kol Loshin, Moshe Lehman joining us, and the Kirsch family, Jay Siegel, for some reason on Facebook, and Matthew Guy, Dr. Guy is joining us now for our 20th Zoomer. So by Mincha, Saba asked me a question. Saba asked me that since in the plague of Dever the animals died, so where were the horses that all the horses that were by the Yamsuf? So actually, the Rishonim asked a question earlier than that. The Rishonim asked, that's a question, but the Rishonim asked even earlier. They said that by the Barid, those people that were Yorei Dvar Hashem brought in their animals. So the Rishonim said, where did they have animals? If they all died in Dever, where did they have the animals to bring in? So there's two schools of thought on this. One school of thought is that the Dever was a plague. In a plague, some people die, a lot of people, but not all people die. And the same thing was true with the animals. Animals died, but not all the animals died. And even though Paro might have lost good animals, good horses, he requisitioned the other horses for his military. And whatever horses were there, he grabbed for his military. So that's one school of thought. The other school of thought was that in Dever, it was the god of Egypt that died, and that is the sheep and the goat, because those were the gods of Egypt. And horses didn't die in Dever. So that's another school of thought. Today's shir is being dedicated by A.B. Spry. He also wants us to learn for his daughter, Sarah Bas Yuta, who just had gallbladder surgery. She should have a refuah shleima b'sech shecha Yisrael. And he's learning for the safety of the troops. A.B. just informed us that they had a very serious day in Eretz Yisrael with a booby trap, with some rescue of hostages, trying to rescue hostages. So there should be a Yeshua for Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should give us a Yeshua. We also learn especially for the safety of Issa Zev ben Yuta, by Shimon Klein, Li Nishmas Asher Anshe ben Yehuda, Gittel Ba Shimon Pinchas, Irving Fishbaum for his Gesund Issa ben Rezel, and Irving also is dedicating the Chak tonight, but we'll mention by the shir also now that it's his father's Yartzeit, Eliyahu Yosef ben Yisrael. His neshama should have an aliyah. He should be a melech yosher for his family, for all of us, and all of Klal Yisrael. We are holding on the bottom of Daf Samach Vav Amid Beis. The Gemara asks, you just said that Shinui Shem is kaina according to Beis Hillel. And Beis Hillel holds that a Shinui Shem, change of a name, is kaina. Says the Gemara, but V'harei Marish, a beam. Now here, by the way, Marshall is not a picky thief. He steals cars, he steals beds, and he steals beams. V'harei Marish, the Ika Shinui Hashem, if Marshall steals a beam and builds it into his roof, so there's a change of name. Obviously, it's a change of name because the Meikara, initially it's called Kishura, initially it's called a beam, Vahashta Talala, and now it's called a roof. Yet, v'tanan ala morish hagozel shebanu babira. The din is if Marshall steals a beam and builds it into his mansion, shenoitel damav, he could restore. He stole it from Gedalia. He could restore the money to Gedalia and doesn't have to rip the beam out of his mansion. Mipnei takanas hashav. Because otherwise he won't do tshuva. If he's going to have to dismantle his mansion, he's going to say, I'm sorry, I'm not that good of a guy. Right? So in order that it should be easy for him to do tshuva, we allow him to give Gedalia money. But the Gemara says, we only let him do this because we want to give him a chance to repent. But if not, it has to be returned in its original state. But why? Wasn't he kainit b'shinei Hashem? Initially it was a beam, and then afterwards it was a roof. So he shouldn't have to return the item itself to Gedalia because he was kainit with Shinei Hashem. Answers the Gemara, I'm sorry, a beam is always a beam. Just like we say about Marshall, Marshall is always Marshall. A beam is always a beam. Amar Reb Yosef, Morish Shmayalav. Even when it's in the roof, it's still considered a beam. Look at the beams in the roof. The Tanya, Tzla'is Habayis. It's interesting. We're going to talk about this in the Chak tonight, in the Navi section of the Chak. Tzla'is Habayis, what does it mean, the Tzla'is Habayis? Elu Hamalatatin. These are the frames, the framings. Like, for example, when they inserted a beam into the wall, they would frame it around so that the beam wouldn't get damaged from the moisture of the wall. Va'ubim, what are ubim? Elo hamarishes. These are the beams. So you see, even when they're in the building, they're still considered beams. Rabbi Zeira says, if the item was not changed, it could be removed from the roof in its original state. If it's reversible, if it can return back to its original state, even though there's a change of a name, says the Gemara. Now before we learn this next Gemara, let me just give you a preface. We know that a mikveh is disqualified with 3 lugin of mayim she'uvim. A mikveh is disqualified with 3 lug of drawn water. That means if it's water that was drawn with a keli and poured into the mikveh, it's disqualified with 3 lugin of mayim she'uvim. We'll see that it's only drabanan, but it is disqualified. Now, if you take wood, there's always a attempt to fill the mikveh with water from elsewhere, but the water has to come not through a keli. So if you take a block of wood and make a pipe out of it and then attach it to the ground, it retains its status of a keli, and water that goes through it will disqualify the mikveh. But if you attach the block to the ground and then hollow it out while it's already attached to the ground, then it doesn't get a din of a keli, and then it doesn't disqualify the mikveh. Water passing through it does not disqualify the mikveh. Let's see this inside. Says the Gemara, "V'shinei Hashem she'eino chayzel l'briyasai mi'avishinoi." Is a change of name that is not reversible, is it a shinoi? V'arei tzinor, a pipe, the meikara ketzitzta. Originally, it was a block of wood. V'hashta tzinura, and then when you hollow it out, it becomes a pipe. V'tanya, tzinor shechakaku. If you hollowed out the pipe before you attached it to the ground, ulebesayif kavu, and then you attached it to the ground, it retains its status of a pipe, of a keli, and paisel as a mikveh. The water that passes through it disqualifies the mikveh. However, kavu, if you attached it first to the ground when it was a block of wood, or lebesayf chakaku, and you carved it out once it's already attached to the ground, then ain't a paisel as a mikveh. But wait a second. If Shine Hashem that if says we amrit Shine Hashem milsahi, but if you're going to say that a change of a name counts even where it's not reversible, like this pipe, then afilu kavul b'seif chakaku, even if you attached to the ground and then carved it out, the Shini Hashem that now it's a pipe should give it the status of a pipe and it should pass the mikveh. Nami li pasel. Says, you're right except for one thing. Shani she'iva d'midrabbanani. Mayim she'uvim is d'rabbanan, and since it's d'rabbanan, so there we weren't so makbid on the Shini Hashem. So the Gemara says, then even if you hollowed it out before you attached it to the ground, says the Gemara, no, because Hasam ikataris keli alav betalish. There, it has a status of a utensil before it's attached to the ground, before it's bottled to the ground. Hacha here ain't taris keli alav betalish. It didn't have a status of a utensil before you attached it to the ground. Once you put the block to the ground, it became bottled to the ground, and therefore, although you hollowed it out, it doesn't become a keli and it doesn't pass on the mikveh. Meisvei, the Gemara asks further, as we welcome in, by the way, Pesach Siegelman and Abe Arbach, Yitzi Muller, Moshe Lehman, Michal, Nachman. It's great to have everybody. Almost everybody. Meisvei, I didn't mean you. Meisvei.
Oh, who did you mean?
I certainly didn't mean you. You just have a guilty conscience. Meisvei, what makes you think I meant you? Ha! What a preposterous idea. Meisvei, Haganef. Oh, now I mean you. Haganef. Haganef. A thief. A gazlan, a robber. That's somebody that steals it outright. Honest. Getting closer, an extortionist. Hekdesh and hektish, their declaration of hektish is hektish. Utrumas and truma, and their removal of truma is truma. Umaisrais and maisim. So the Gemara says, aha, this is a clear raya to Rav Yosef that Shina is kaina. Because if Shina is not kaina, then how could Marshall be makdish something that's not his? Says the Gemara, no. Amrei Hasam Ikoy Shinei Hashem. Besides the yish of the owner, he stole it from Gedalia, besides the fact that Gedalia was Miyayish, there's also a change of name. The Meikara Tivla, initially, before Marshall separated the Truma, it was called Tevel. Tevel, by the way, means Tovloi. It's no good. It's untied. Vashta Truma. Hektish Meikara Chulin, Vashta Hektish. Initially it was Chulin, and now it's Hektish. And by the way, the Rishonim explain over here that we say that it gets into Marshall's Rishus and the Shiniak Shem Boin K'achas. It's simultaneous. And the reason why it works as simultaneous is because it's synthesized together with the fact that Gedalia was already Miyayish. That would not be enough, however, according to Rabbah, but also the fact that it undergoes, at the moment that he declares it Truma, it undergoes a Shini Hashem, from Tevel to Truma, or from Chulin to Hektish, therefore Marshall could declare it Truma and Hektish. Amar Rav Chisda, Amar Rav Yonason, and if you're just joining us now, watch out, Eddie is on the move. We don't know where he's going. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'akol niyeh b'dvaro. So Amar Rav Chisda, Amar Rav Yonason, Menayin l'shinu yishu kaina. We already discussed this earlier. How do we know that when you make a change, like Marshall steals wood and he makes out of it a tennis racket, right? How do we know he acquires it with shinui and he only has to pay for the wood? Shenemar, because it says in the pasuk, Heishiv esagzela, he returns that which he stole. But then it says the superfluous asher gazal. Now obviously, if it says he's returning the theft, that means he stole it. So matam lema asher gazal. Why does it have to say the redundant asher gazal? It's telling us im ke'ein shegazal. If it's still wood, like when he stole it, yazer. But if he made it into a tennis racket, he acquired it, and therefore he only has to pay the value of the wood. V'im lav dam ba'alma ba'ishluma. So now the Gemara says, wait a second. We need this Asher Gazel for another reason. You see, here's a shayla. Chatzkel steals wood from Gedalia. Gedalia accosts him. Where's my wood? And Chatzkel swears that he didn't steal it. So the din is, when we find it by him, he has to pay a fifth for swearing falsely. Right? And the din is,
only if he's minor, right?
that if he's minor, correct. The din is, if he dies, because if he is not minor, then he pays kafel. If he dies, then the children don't have to pay the fifth. And the reason is because it says, V'eshev es ha'gzela asher gazal. Only the one that steals it has to pay the fifth. So the Gemara says, we already have a drasha from the asher gazal. Hi asher gazal m'boy limute gezel aviv. That if they're making restoration for their father's theft, she'ena ma'asav chaimish al gezel aviv. They don't have to pay the fifth because it's only V'eshev es ha'gzela asher gazal, only the one that steals it. So asher gazal is not extra to tell us this drasha that shinui is not kaina. So the Gemara says no. If it just wants to exclude the theft of one's father, imkei nichtav rachman v'heshiv es gezeloi, he should return his gezel, which would tell us that if it's the father's gezel, they don't pay a fifth. Why does it have to say the whole extra phrase asher gazel lamali lamichtav? Shema min hatarte. We learn out two things. Number one, that you don't pay the fifth when it's inherited, and number two, that you don't pay if it's only if it's ke'ein shegazel, if it's still in the state of when he stole it. Now there's another version over here because we all like more than one version. V'ikad amrei. Amar Rav Chisda, Amar Rav Yonason, Menayin l'shinui she'enoi kaina. How do we know that if Marshall steals it and converts it to a tennis racket that he doesn't acquire it? Shenemer v'heishiv es ha'gzela, he has to return what he stole. Mikol makam. Give it back. I v'ksiv asher gazel. No, that's coming to tell you that if Chatzkel steals and swears and confesses and then dies, then the children don't have to pay the fifth. Only on his own gezel he pays a fifth. So there's two different versions of how to teach this. Amarullah. How do we know this would seem to be a raya to Rav Yosef? How do we know that if Gedalia gives up hope because the world famous bandit Marshall took it, so he's not getting it back? So how do we know that Marshall is not kind of, even though Gedalia was miyayish. Shenemar, because it says, and this is interesting, this is a pasuk in Malachi. We're going back all the way till the end of Tanakh. Right? All the way to the end of Tanakh. Chag Yischai and Malachi, the end of Tanakh. Va'avesim gazel, and you bring as offerings, the Navi reprimands them, and you bring as offerings gazel, that which is stolen, esa piseach, that which is lame, ve'esa chayla, and that which is sick. So the Gemara says, gazel dumya de piseach. Theft is similar to that which is lame. Ma piseach, the less late takanta, there's no way to correct it. You can never bring it as a carbon. It's lame, you can never bring it as a carbon. Klal. Af, so also, gazel, the less late takanta. So that would mean that you can never bring it as a carbon. Loishna lifnei yish, loishna leacha yish. Makes no difference whether Gedalia was miyayish or not. So you see over here that in the we see from here that yish is not kind. Rava Amamihach. Rava brings a raya from the following pasuk. It says, "Karbanai." Only his carbon can be offered as a sacrifice, as an oila, as a burnt offering. V'lo yagazel. Not if it's stolen. Now, obviously, if Marshall stole it from Gedalia and Gedalia was not miyayish yet, of course he can't bring it as a carbon. How can he bring it as a carbon? He can't dedicate it. It's not his. So Amos, ilay malafnei yish pshita, lama likra. It must be, it's talking about elalav la'achar yish. It means even after Gedalia is miyayish. Now, after Gedalia is miyayish, why can't he bring it? V'shmami no yish loikani. And that shows that yish is not kaina. Shmami no. Says, but Rava explained it differently. How can you say that Rava is saying this when Rava earlier said that it's talking about where Marshall stole Gedalia's dedicated animal? It was already a carbon. And therefore the reason why he can't bring it is because even if Gedalia is miyayish, the yish doesn't do anything since it's already in the Rishus Gavaya. V'ravahu dama de gazel carbon de chavre. So therefore it's no raya that yish is not kind. So the Gemara answers two answers. Iba Yisema Hodabay. Rava retracted from what he said yesterday. The Iba Yisema will switch the name. One of the dictums is not Rava, one of the dictums is Rapapa. Chad minayu Rapapa. Now, as we go to the two dots, and I want to remind everybody so that the others should get mentally ready for it as we welcome in Richard Rosenzweig. Now we have 25 Zoomers here. We have two Zoomers on Facebook, Jay Siegel and Richard Rosenzweig. That would make it 27. And, Marshall is counting. It's, not that Marshall's very interested, because in the night we had 35, he wasn't even here. But, right, Marshall? Yeah. Notice that I switched to Chatzkel. I didn't kill you. So you should count your blessings. Yes. Devora. Says the Gemara, Umidas tashlume arba v'chamisha. We said that kefil is by everything, animated, non-animated, while tashlume dalvei is only by sharvaseh. So the Gemara says, but why? If you remember, we had a whole sugya that by Shabbos it says shar, and it's all creatures. There's a mitzvah shvisas behemtai that you shouldn't work animals, and it applies to animals, and it applies to beasts, it applies to birds. So we should say that there should be the knas by other creatures too. B'amai, nail of shor mishabbos. We should learn out shor from Shabbos. Malahalon chayav oif kiyotz, just like over there, beasts and birds are included. Afkan, we should say chayav oif kiyotz. Amarava, Amakra, so Rava says, it says in the pasuk, shor v'seh, in the pasuk of paying, Daled v'hei, it repeats shor and seh twice. Here's the lashon of the pasuk. Ki yignoi v'sharoi seh, if a man steals an ox or a sheep, u'tavacha yoy mecharoi, and then after Marshall steals it, he slaughters it or he sells it, chamisha baka yishalem tachas hashar, he pays 5 cattle instead of the ox, v'arba tzayin tachas haseh, and 4 sheep instead of the sheep. So you see, it says shor and seh in the beginning of the pasuk, and it says shor and seh at the end of the pasuk. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava, Amar Kra, shor v'seh shnei pa'amim, and the fact that it repeats it, it's to restrict it shor v'seh in, that the knas of dal v'hei is only by an ox and a sheep, midi achin aloi, but not by nothing else. So the Gemara says, in order to learn a drasha, one of them has to be extra. Because if we're saying it, that it repeats it to tell us only these, it has to be that it's a redundancy. It's otherwise not needed. So the Gemara says, Imrei hey miyater. Which shor v'seh is extra? The one in the beginning of the pasuk or the one at the end of the pasuk? Ilay ma shor v'seh the sefer miyater. It didn't have to say shor and seh again at the end of the pasuk. The nichten v'rachmana, all the pasuk had to say was ki yignov shoroi seh, if the marshal steals an ox or a sheep, utavacha yomachara, he slaughters it or sells it, chamisha baka yishalim tachtav, he should pay 5 cattle, which means oxen instead of it, and arba tzayin tachtav, and 4 sheep instead of it. It didn't have to say shor v'seh at the end. It says the Gemara, ikas rachmana hachi, if the Torah would have written that, hava amina boi shlume tisha lekol echad ve'echad, I might think that if he steals a shor or he steals a seh, he has to pay 9. 5 oxen and 4 sheep. V'chi teimor ksiv tachtov. It didn't. Then it would only have to say once. It should say chamisha bacher yishalem v'arba tzayin. It doesn't have to say tachtov twice. Hari tachtov miyater. Ha'uma b'ayilei l'drash achrina. That's needed for another drasha. The Tanya yochel gonav shor shavamana. I might think that if Marshall steals an expensive ox, Gedalia's Elsie, Yeshalim Tachtov Negidim, I might think that he could replace it with 5 nebuchs. Marshall always has nebuchs around. He could pay it with 5 wretched oxen. Talmud Leimer Tachtov. It says Tachtov. It has to be of value instead of it. Ella says to Gemara, you're right. The shor and the seh at the end of pasuk is necessary. Ella shor v'seh the reisha miyuter. It's the shor v'seh in the beginning of the pasuk that's extra. The nichtav rachmana ki yignoi v'ish utavacha yumacharoi. If a man steals and he slaughters and he sells, chamisha baka yisham tachas hashar, he should pay 5 instead of the ox. It doesn't have to say shor v'seh in the beginning of the pasuk. It says, you can't do that. Because ikas rachmana hachi, if the Torah would do this, have amina ad the gunif tray, it's only if he steals both. Because if the pasuk would just say ki yignav ish, if the pasuk starts off Ki yignai vishu tavachai u'mecharai, and it doesn't say shor oseh, I might think that he has to steal both. Says the Gemara, I might think that ikas rachman hachi hava mina had the gun of tray. It's only if he steals both, v'tavachlu, and he slaughters it. So the Gemara says no, it can't be that he slaughters both because v'tavachai ksiv, which is singular, l'chad. So the Gemara says, but still, I might think that it's only if he steals both. The Ema had the gun of travayu umazvin had the gun of tray. Excuse me. The Ema had the gun of travayu umazvin. Maybe it means that he has to steal both of them and sell both of them. So the Gemara says, no. It says they're also singular. Or macharai ksiv lachad. So the Gemara says, but still there's another possibility. The aim have amina ad the gun of tray, since it doesn't say shor oseh, I might think he has to steal both an ox and a sheep, v'tov echad, and slaughter one, umazvin chad, and sell one. It says tavachai u'mecharai. Says the Gemara, no, but it says oi mecharai ksiv. So the Gemara says, but still, vakata avamina, at the gun of travay, he has to steal both the shor and the seh, v'tovachad, and slaughter one, umeshayachad, and keep one, or mazvin chad, or sell one, umeshayachad. Ella says to Gemara, you're right. It has to say some clarity in the beginning, and it has to say some clarity at the end. Ella shor the sefer, the shor at the end of the pasuk, the sed the reisha, and the sed at the beginning of the pasuk miyat. Why? The nicht of Rachmana, the Torah could have said, ki yignov ish shor, if a man steals a shor, utavacha yumacharai, and slaughters it or sells it, chamisha bakar yishalim tachtov, he pays 5 cattle instead of it, so it's talking about only a shor, or v'arbat sign, or 4 sheep if it's tachas hasher. So it could get away with only saying shor in the reisha and seh in the sefer. Shor the sefer, the shor at the end, v'seh the reisha lamali. Why do we need it? So that's extra to tell me that you don't learn out shor from Shabbos to include chayis v'oifas, but rather shmami no shor v'seh in midi achrin aloi. Now we'll learn one more piece of Gemara. If Marshall steals and Baruch Ian steals from Marshall, Baruch doesn't have to pay Marshall kef, because it says ish, only if you steal it from the owner, not when you steal it from a thief. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav, so Rav qualifies this. That's only when Marshall stole it from Gedalia, and Gedalia was not Meyayish yet. But after Yish, like Rabbah, who says Yish is Kaina, Kanu Ganav Rishon, the Marshall becomes the owner, because it was Kaina with Yish. And then, when Baruch steals it from Marshall, the Ganav Sheni, Mishtalim Tashlumei Kefil, then he has to pay Kefil, the Ganav Rishon, to the first and extraordinary thief, Marshall. We're going to stop over here. We did the Mishnah Yomi already, because we're going to move right into Chok.